Hello everyone, hope you guys are doing well. Today we'll be discussing the economics of renewable energy. Hope you guys are excited, and let's jump right into today's presentation. Renewable energy. Here are the table of contents for today. We're going to be discussing the differences between fossil fuel and renewable energy, the history of energy, talking about the economic costs, and finally concluding while talking about how to get to a zero greenhouse gas emission. First off, let's talk about what energy is. Energy is the capacity for doing work. This work can be both physical activity or mental activity. Today, most of our energy comes from coal, oil, and natural gas, which are known as fossil fuels. And fossil fuels are created from decomposing plants and animals, which have existed millions of years ago. And this form of fuel contains carbon and hydrogen atoms, which can be burned for energy. So essentially what we're doing is we're digging up the crust and trying to get this form, which could be burned into chemical energy. In 2019 alone, 80% of domestic energy production was from fossil fuels, and 80% of domestic energy consumption originated from fossil fuels as well. So our civilization is very heavily dependent upon this energy source. Renewable energy is energy that comes from natural sources or processes that are constantly replenished. So examples of renewable energy include wind, solar, rain, and geothermal. We can expect sunlight to keep shining and wind to keep on blowing, even if their availability depends on time and weather. The difference between renewable and fossil fuel is that renewable energy can be replenished, where fossil fuels are a one-time use. The best part of using renewable energy is sustainability and independence. Sustainability, as we don't compromise our own planet, and independence by not relying on other nations for energy sources. History has shown time and time over again that energy problems has been a contributor to war, famine, and political instability. Even now, the Russia and Ukraine war shows that European countries heavily relied upon Russia's oil exports are suffering. So what is required? We need an infrastructure that is built upon renewable energy. And to do this, we need to convert the previous fossil fuel infrastructure to a supergrid. We're going to be talking about this later on. Humans have harnessed nature's power for heating, transportation, lighting, and many more. Think about how we use the windmills to grind grain, boats to sail, and the sun for providing warmth throughout the day. Over the past 200 years or so, humans turned to cheaper and dirtier energy sources such as coal and fracked gas, which leads us to talking about the history of energy transitions. Civilizations that have harnessed water, for example, thrived, while the ones that haven't failed. For example, let's talk about the Romans, who have built an aqueduct which allows water to channel from fresh water source, such as a lake, to a city through the use of a slope. Connecting water to cities granted access to drinking, irrigation, and even bathing. The Maya civilization created a paved reservoir system which collected water during rainfall seasons to last them for several months. However, due to a 100-year drought, the civilization collapsed. The quest for natural resources has always been at the epicenter of civilizations and its sustainability. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, humans relied on biomass such as wood and crops for heat and muscles for kinetic energy. In the 16th and 17th century, the prices of firewood and charcoal skyrocketed due to shortages driven by increased consumption of households. And as economies started to grow more and more complex, they were also requiring a cheaper source of energy, which led to the introduction of coals. Unlike mills, which depended upon water and wind, steam-powered machines could rely on a steady supply of coal. So in the 1800s, coal accounted for 1.7% of the energy mix. However, through the Industrial Revolution and inventions such as James Watt's steam engine and steamships, the infrastructure of the US was growing reliant on fossil fuels. And by 1920, this is just 120 years after, 54.4% of the energy mix included coal. So, in 1800, 1.7%. By 1920, 54.4%. Isn't that crazy how fast we have shifted over just 120 years? Sure, 120 years is a lot, but the amount of infrastructure that has been built on fossil fuels is quite alarming. As coal use and production increased, the cost of production fell, and technological advances brought new ways to use coal. This further drove integration, where coal was used in homes to cook food, create forges, and even locomotives. Around 1950s, a new energy source started to garner attention from the mass production of automobiles. Prior to mass production, oil was mainly used for lamps, but with the introduction of the assembly line, oil became very lucrative. With the invention of the Bunsen burner, natural gas found an opportunity to become a major source of energy inside home heating, for cooking, water heaters, and other appliances. And major credit to visual capitalists for the photo, as well as the data. This brings us to the current era. In the past decades, there's been a shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy. A huge contributor to growth in renewable energy was lower cost of production and efficiency. For example, solar energy dropped its cost by 90% the past decade, according to data from Lazard's Levelized Cost of Energy report. And all of the sources will be down in the link in the description if you guys want to take a further look at it. This made solar arrays the least costly option to build and operate. Along with solar panels, the cost of wind farms also dropped by 71% the past decade. For example, solar energy drops its cost by 90% the past decade, according to data from Lazard's Levelized Cost for Energy report. Make sure you guys check out the sources down below if you guys are further interested. This made solar arrays the least costly option to build and operate. Along with solar panels, the cost of wind farms also dropped by 71% the past decade. So this will greatly contribute to increasing access and building the infrastructure of clean energy. In addition to lower costs, technological improvement and the rise of economies of scale also contributed to lowering costs. As demand for solar panels increased to create satellites, more panels were being produced, bringing the cost down and shifting to other niche purposes. And since the 1976, the increase in solar capacity had led to a 20.2 average in the price of solar panels. Not only has the cost gone down, but there has been a radical shift in improving the conversion from solar to chemical energy. Fossil fuels will continue to meet the world's energy demand until the infrastructure of renewable energy takes place. One of the daunting problems of renewable energy is efficiency. Fossil fuels are made of concentrated pools of energy, and it's readily available, making them very convenient. Currently, a gallon of gasoline contains 37 kilowatts of energy. Compare that to a typical solar panel, which generates 0.2 kilowatts of energy per hour of bright sunshine. Not too much, right? This means that it requires 1 week of sunlight to provide the same energy as a gallon of gasoline. This means that renewable energy cannot be conjured up at any moment we need energy, creating a supply and demand issue, which leads up to an increase in costs. Another characteristic of renewable energy is that it's sensitive to interest rates due to high capital cost. For example, the cost of setting up a commercial wind turbine on average is $1.3 million per megawatt. Despite the large setup costs, however, wind farms are considered much cheaper compared to coal if we take out the subsidies. Lazard found in December 2016 that subsidized wind projects cost between $32 and $62 per megawatt per hour, while coal costs between $57 and $148 per megawatt per hour. Another downside of renewable energy is that energy is very concentrated. For example, think about a barren desert, where it has opportunities of receiving a lot of sunlight. However, the problem here is that it's very distant from an urban city where the demand is high. So, solar energy is strongest usually in the summer, where wind energy is strongest in the winter. So the best option would be garnering a system where it combines the two to create an abundant supply of electricity. So now let's talk about what is required to transition and adopt renewable energy. Investments, policies, and the infrastructure of the energy industry are still heavily skewed in favor of fossil fuels. As long as fossil fuels are meeting the demands of the world, it will persist. For mass adoption, the government and economy must address the oil industry and its control of the energy sector. In addition, we the people need to be aware of the economics that the economic system creates externalities such as healthcare costs, greenhouse gas emissions, and water pollution, which are not accounted for in the price of fossil fuel use. Thus, it's important to make sure to price these factors when weighing the benefits and costs. In 2020 alone, fossil fuels received $5.9 trillion in subsidies, which is roughly $11 million every minute according to the International Monetary Fund. Now let's compare this to how much renewable energy was subsidized, which was $634 billion in 2020. This is a little more than 10% of what fossil fuels received. And this disparity in part is caused to stabilize the price of oil and to ensure an adequate domestic supply supporting fuel production. Another problem is technology gaps. Renewables still require much innovation to ensure that cost reduction trends are maintained. In theory, all of humanity's needs can be met by solar power. In just a couple of hours, the Earth receives more energy from the sun than all of the energy used by mankind in 1 year. However, the conversion rate of energy is extremely inefficient. Currently, solar panels convert around 17 to 20% of sunlight into electricity, while wind turbines capture around 20 to 40% of wind into energy. So thus, we need better chemistry, development in materials, and storage for optimization and creating a sustained energy source. Lastly, I want to talk about supergrids, which are essential for replacing greenhouse fossil fuels. A supergrid is a wide area transmission network that aims to transfer high volumes of electricity across great distances. And this will be important to carry energy derived from areas such as a barren desert we discussed to energy-intensive urban cities. And now, I'd like to end with a quote from Abraham Lincoln. As yet, the wind is an untamed, unharnessed force, and quite possibly one of the greatest discoveries hereafter to be made will be the taming and harnessing of it, by Abe Lincoln. And we're back. Hope you guys enjoyed this presentation and learned a few thing or two. And we seem to be at a breaking point or a tipping point from transitioning over from fossil fuels to what seems like more renewable energy, more cleaner energy sources. So I'm really happy to bring this issue and to learn more about it. And I appreciate your patience along with your curiosity. Hope to see you guys in the next video, and I'll talk to you guys very soon. Peace.